Running back Micah Cook has been on a roller coaster. Once the nation's top recruit in Alabama commit, he was destined for greatness. But a fatal car crash killed his father, shattered his leg, and cost him over 100 scholarships. But Micah didn't quit. With help from a new offensive coordinator named Coach Terry, Micah found an unlikely opportunity, walking on at FIU. He exploded onto the scene with a 51-yard touchdown on his first carry and led the nation in rushing yards, all while wearing a leg brace. However, FIU was only a pit stop, and Micah transferred to Ole Miss after Lane Kiffin promised him the Heisman Trophy. He dominated the SEC, racking up over 2,500 all-purpose yards with 27 touchdowns and was a human highlight reel. But unfortunately, his team was not, and the Heisman slipped away. Now, as a projected top 5 NFL draft pick, Micah Cook has entered the transfer portal one final time seeking a national championship and the Heisman Trophy. Will he fulfill his road to glory or go home empty-handed? 2 years, 2 heartbreaks. The first, Micah's freshman year when FIU blew their final home game to advance to the Sun Belt Conference Championship, then lost again in their bowl game a few weeks later. The second, an end-of-season loss to in-state rival Mississippi State on a double overtime butt fumble this past season, the final nail in the coffin for Micah's playoff hopes. However, in both cases, Micah was an elite player on an average team, so for his final season, he was searching for a contender. There were 2 options, Florida or Texas. On paper, the Gators were a mess. They limped through a 7-6 season with injuries piling up. Blowouts occurred every other week, including a 41-10 beatdown at the hands of Micah and the Rebels. Florida looked like a rebuild, but there are more layers to this story. Micah's mother lived in Tampa 2 hours away, and he watched his first Sunshine Showdown live with his late dad inside the swamp. On the field, quarterback DJ Lagway, a Heisman dark horse, was returning, along with a dangerous receiving core. And Micah, he could be the spark that made everything click. Then there was Texas. They finished 12-2 last season and made a deep playoff run, but lost in the semifinals after their run game collapsed. Just 17 rushing yards on one of the biggest stages of the season. But these problems weren't new, since they finished near the bottom of the SEC in rushing. However, what they did have was Arch Manning. The golden boy and face of college football was also back for one final season. 2 Heisman contenders, 1 backfield, and under Steve Sarkisian's offense, the Longhorns looked like a cheat code that would terrorize opposing defenses every Saturday. The clock was ticking as days went by, and Micah's decision lingered like fog. Florida or Texas? Both schools had high-powered offenses. Both felt like contenders. Both even played Alabama this season, so Micah was torn. But then, he received an ESPN notification on his phone. Breaking news. FIU offensive coordinator Jay Terry hired as new offensive coordinator at Florida. This was the only coach who gave a forgotten kid in a leg brace a shot. The coach who watched film on a shattered Micah and still believed he could be great. The coach who didn't see damaged goods, but a future star. Last season, after Micah left FIU, most assumed Coach Terry's offense would deteriorate. Instead, the Panthers lit up the scoreboard, finishing with a #1 offense in the Sun Belt for the 2nd straight year. Now Coach Terry was headed to the SEC to rebuild the same Florida offense that Ole Miss torched just months earlier. But for Micah, he didn't need a phone call, nor did he need a recruiting pitch. His mind was already made up. The #1 player in the transfer portal committed, and his final ride was taking flight with the Florida Gators. The stakes, higher than ever. Win the Heisman, win the Natty. The last time Micah Cook touched the Gatorhead, he was just a wide-eyed recruit, dreaming of Saturdays in the swamp. Now, years later and donning a new number, his hand pressed against the cold bronze again. But this time, game day was real. As he stepped from the tunnel into a swamp of blue and orange, the crowd's roar punched him in the chest. Army controlled the ball for the first 5 minutes, playing keep away before settling for 3. Then the swamp finally got what it was waiting for. The season debut of Micah Cook. The first play wasn't the fireworks fans expected. A busted assignment by the left tackle led to Micah getting tackled for no gain. But his next run was all heart, as 4 defenders bounced off of him before he finally went down. First down Gators. 1 play later, the fireworks came. Micah bounced around the right edge in a blur, picking up 2 excellent downfield blocks before putting the safety in the spin cycle. He coasted his way into the end zone and performed a bow, giving fans a taste of what was coming all season. Army hit back with a touchdown and held a 10-7 lead early in the second quarter, but Florida turned up the intensity. Dallas Wilson took 2 slants to the house on back-to-back drives, and Micah punched in 2 more scores before halftime, giving the Gators a commanding 35-10 lead. Led by Micah with 6 total touchdowns, the Gators offense poured on another 31 points after halftime, winning 66-10. The Gators were home cooking because they carried their momentum straight into Week 2 against Division II FCS, a team that clearly showed up just to cash the check. Florida barely broke a sweat, dominating FCS 27-0, and Micah was player of the game again after racking up over 250 yards of total offense. But the Gators weren't finished. One more home game stood between them and the revenge matchup circled in red on Micah's calendar. Against Miami, Ohio, he gave the Swamp Faithful a show. 5 more touchdowns as the Red Hawks were steamrolled 65-0. Through 3 games, the Gators had outscored their opponents 158-10, but the rest of the country wasn't buying it. These were games they were supposed to win, and analysts questioned if they would survive next week in Tuscaloosa, inside the 5th-ranked toughest stadium. In high school, Micah Cook had imagined this night. Tuscaloosa lights, 100,000 raucous fans, and big play touchdowns. But in that dream, he was the hometown hero, the one Alabama embraced. The Crimson Tide stormed out of their tunnel first, a tidal wave of crimson helmets filling the night air as the stadium shook under the weight of their fight song. The place felt alive, like the stands themselves were breathing, roaring, daring anyone to challenge them here. Then came the Gators. The instant their helmets broke the tunnel shadows, the boos hit, long, loud, and relentless. The opening kickoff set the tone after the Gators returned the ball into enemy territory, giving the offense a short field to start with. Despite the big return, the stadium was still pulsating throughout the state of Alabama as the tight end went in motion for a lead toss. He motioned back out, picked up a perfect block, and with one burst of acceleration, Micah was gone, blazing down the sideline untouched, slicing through Alabama's defense like a ghost from their own past. The sellout crowd was absolutely disgusted. Nevertheless, the Tide counterpunched immediately, powering through the Gators' defense for a score before failing a surprise 2-point try. Then they turned up the pressure, forcing Florida into a dry spell while the crowd regained its voice. But the momentum shifted again early in the second quarter. Micah was stuffed on a first down counter run, but he made it a manageable 3rd down after planting his foot in the ground on a wide zone. It didn't matter though, because on the following play, Aiden got called for offensive pass interference. The crowd noise picked up as the offense now faced a 3rd and 13 on their own 14-yard line. But Coach Cherry had a trick up his sleeve. Utilizing Micah's speed, he lined Micah up on the left side of the field before sending him in orbit motion. Micah was wide open as he ran a real route out of the backfield, moving the chains and once again silencing the crowd. The momentum continued to fade for Alabama after a defender jumped off sides. Then Micah capitalized on the mistake with another soul-crushing first down. 2 plays later, Micah sucked whatever life remained out of Bryant-Denny Stadium after scoring on a 47-yard touchdown. He was receiving most of the credit, but the entire Gators team showed up to play tonight. A pick 6 a few drives later put the Gators up 21-6. Then the Tide turned the ball over on 4th down, giving Micah and the Gators offense one final chance to score with 59 seconds left. Coach Terry planned on going into the half up 2 scores, but Micah picked up 6 yards on the first down carry, then DJ unexpectedly bombed the Tide right down the middle. Timeout, Gators. After picking up 2 yards on first down and using another timeout, Coach Terry called a screen for Micah, but he failed to get out of bounds and the Gators were forced to use their last timeout with 17 seconds left. 100,000 screaming fans made the field shake as Florida lined up for a red zone corner on 3rd and 4. Micah ran an excellent route, but DJ was patient, taking a big hit before putting the ball on a rope right into Micah's outstretched hands. The disappointment was impossible to miss in the faces scattered throughout the stadium as the Gators were up big, 28-6 at the half. However, Alabama's pride refused to let them die, and they returned to the field after halftime as the actual number 2 team in the country. They stacked the box and sent blitz after blitz, forcing 3 and outs while clawing back with touchdowns of their own. Meanwhile, the energy was building with every possession, and the Gators' once massive lead has suddenly shrunk to just 7, with 1 minute 37 seconds left. Gator fans were worried. 1 first down. That's all they needed to save themselves from blowing the lead and pulling off the upset. The crowd noise was echoing throughout the stadium as Micah was stuffed on the first down carry, and Alabama immediately called timeout. To make things worse, DJ was tackled in the backfield after a bad handoff the following play, losing 5 yards. Timeout, Alabama. Wanting to force a final timeout, Coach Terry played it safe and called a power run for Micah as the Undertaker bell sounded off like a cannon. The receiver went in motion, then Micah was led around the edge by his fullback and pulling guard, silencing the Tide faithful fans in an instant. There was nothing but green grass in front of Micah as he soared past the first down marker before attempting a hurdle for style points, which failed. Alabama used their final timeout, but it didn't matter. Ball game. He was the player of the game with 180 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, stepping himself into the driver's seat of the Heisman race. Florida had taken down number 2 Alabama on the road, the Gators were still undefeated, and the college football world was officially on notice. And with a favorable schedule the rest of the way, nothing could stop the Florida Gators. Right? Micah remained the Heisman frontrunner, but the team carried the weight of the Vanderbilt loss into the swamp the following week against Arkansas. Every Arkansas drive felt like a threat, and Florida needed Micah's 3 rushing touchdowns to escape with a 33-24 win. It was progress, but still a long way from their early season dominance. A night game against 2-5 Oklahoma in the swamp should have been the reset button. Instead, it turned into another uneasy win. The offense sputtered, drives stalled, and Oklahoma hung around far too long. It was Micah again who saved the day, breaking 2 long runs for touchdowns to seal a narrow 21-14 victory. Ranked in the top 25 for the first time all season, the Gators finally rediscovered their identity versus Missouri the next week. The defense pitched a shutout, and Micah exploded for 200 yards and another 3 touchdowns in a 24-0 statement win. But there was no time to celebrate, because up next was hated rival Georgia. For the Gators, it's simple. Beat Georgia, and the road to the college football playoff stays alive. Lose, and the dream dies here. The Bulldogs opened the game with a field goal after stalling in the red zone. Then the Gators offense took the field after a touchback. Florida's first play from scrimmage was an inside zone to Micah, but he was tackled for no gain. His next carry seemed headed for the same fate until Micah broke 2 tackles, juked out a safety, and came within inches of a first down. On 3rd and short, Micah was hit in the backfield, but still powered forward for the conversion. It was clear, Micah was ready to set the tone. But Georgia wouldn't make it easy because he was tackled for a loss the very next play. Backed up on 2nd and 13, Coach Terry dialed up a pin and pull toss. A pulling guard led the way, allowing Micah to hit the edge. With only the safety to beat, he made a sharp cut and accelerated his way towards the Florida fans in the end zone for the Gators' first touchdown of the day. However, this didn't faze Georgia because they immediately punched back with a touchdown and added another field goal to go up 13-7 late in the second quarter. With just minutes before halftime, Micah caught a flat route for a first down, then took an off-tackle handoff around the edge with plenty of green grass. 2 defenders closed in, but Micah split them with his blazing speed and sprinted down the sideline. A Georgia track star caught him at the 5, but Micah lowered his shoulder and bulldozed his way across the goal line for another Gators touchdown. This is exactly what they needed to give themselves momentum at the break. But Micah wasn't done. On the opening drive after halftime, his Heisman moment came. Micah caught a toss and slipped through a narrow crease, broke into daylight, and galloped down the sideline untouched once again as Georgia fans watched in agony. He stared into the crowd and struck the Heisman pose in the end zone, sending a message to the entire country. You could feel the life empty the stadium after Micah's 3rd touchdown, and the Gators capitalized, scoring twice more to take a big lead, 35-13. When the clock finally bled to 0, the once deafening red and black half of the stadium sat in stunned silence, while the blue and orange side erupted into chaos. With the nation watching, the Gators made a statement, and now they were in full control of their own destiny. 1 week later, the swamp glistened under the lights in a wave of blue, mirroring the all-blue uniforms on the field as the Gators faced off against rival Auburn. The Gators came in ranked number 7, leading the SEC and riding high off the Georgia win. On their first offensive play, Micah sliced through the Tigers for a 71-yard touchdown. He was a highlight machine, stiff-arming linebackers into the turf, leaping over defenders, and just powering his way through the defense. Florida jumped out to a 21-0 lead after Micah walked into the end zone for a second touchdown, but the Tigers clawed back, forcing the Gators to grind out a tense 21-15 win. The climb continued as the Gators were ranked number 5 ahead of their final conference game versus number 9 South Carolina. Williams-Brice Stadium was hostile, but the Gators quickly silenced the crowd with an opening drive touchdown and never looked back. The only blemish? Micah being chased down at the 3-yard line on what looked like a sure 99-yard touchdown run. His teammates wouldn't let him live it down, as the Gators laughed their way to a 33-0 massacre. With that, Florida clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, but there was still one final game circled in red that, depending on who you ask, was the most important game on the schedule. Doak Campbell Stadium was chaotic. Hurricane-like rain soaked the field as the war chant pounded through the night air. Chief Osceola planted the spear at midfield, and 80,000 fans erupted, feeding belief into a 4-7 Seminole team playing with nothing to lose. Coach Terry kicked off the game with a simple duo run, but Micah exploded through a hole and blew past the second level in the blink of an eye. He was gone, at least until his own teammate tripped him up just enough for a Seminole defender to drag him down. Micah popped up frustrated, but what his eyes witnessed next stopped him dead in his tracks. FSU fans holding a Cook poster? However, Micah's teammates only paused the inevitable, because the Gators still put 7 on the board a few plays later. Florida's defense immediately went to work, forcing an early punt, but the Gators' next offensive drive was sloppy. Blown assignments, missed blocks, and busted plays led to a grueling drive, but Micah caught a wide open wheel route on 3rd and 11 that kept them alive. He missed the rest of the series after being hit in the nuts, but the Gators scored again, taking a 14-0 lead. It was all Gators so far in the Sunshine Showdown. Then the mood slowly began to shift. FSU finally answered with a touchdown. Then DJ threw an interception before the half, giving Doak Campbell Stadium another breath of life. However, after the break, both teams struggled to get their offenses rolling, and the game remained 14-7 until Florida State returned a punt inside the 15-yard line. Fortunately, the Gator defense stepped up big on 4th down. Taking over from their own 3-yard line, DJ found his tight end over the middle for 9 yards. Then Micah dropped the pass the following play. With the student section creating chaos directly behind them, Coach Terry called a run up the middle to survive the bad field position. Micah picked up the first down, but a big hit caused a fumble, which FSU recovered. Micah thought it was a horrific call, but his dad always told him not to leave the game up to the refs. To make a bad situation even worse, Micah's first career fumble resulted in 7 for FSU, tying the game at 14 early in the 4th quarter. Third-ranked Gators were officially on upset alert. With just over 5 minutes left, Micah refused to be rattled by his mistake and made a huge play. This was it, the redemption drive. Deep in enemy territory, the Seminoles were Gator bait, but the drive fizzled like a wet fuse and out came the kicker. 17-14 Gators. But there were still 3 timeouts left to play. Too much time. Far too much. Even for a Florida State offense that had been sluggish most of the night. They strung together the sharpest drive of the game, tying it at 17 and forcing overtime in the Sunshine Showdown. Micah had lived both ends of overtime glory. Last year's walk-off jet sweep against LSU was a SportsCenter top 10 play, but the gut-punching butt fumble in the Egg Bowl cost him the Heisman Trophy. The echo of cowbell still lingered in his ears. But now, they'd been drowned out by the relentless war chant as Micah shook hands for the overtime coin toss. The Gators won the toss and elected to go on defense first, but a miscommunication in the secondary led to a Seminole receiver running free. Just like that, Florida trailed for the first time all night. Disaster struck again moments later when DJ attempted to pitch the wet ball, but fumbled as he was hit, sending everyone scrambling until Jaden Ball finally emerged from the pile with the ball. After losing 4 yards, the Gators needed something. Anything. But facing an obvious passing situation, DJ's protection broke like glass, and he was sacked for another loss of 6 yards. It was 3rd and 20, and the season's fate hung on 2 snaps. Coach Terry signaled for a screen. Safe, controlled, maybe enough to set up a makeable 4th down. The play call had potential, but the linebacker slipped through like smoke, cutting Micah down after just a single yard. The collapse felt almost scripted. Everyone was going deep, including Micah, as he motioned out of the backfield. He exploded off the line, and the post route came open behind him, but DJ was hammered as he threw the ball. By the time Micah turned around, the safety was already sprinting down the opposite sideline with everyone chasing him. The blow was brutal as Micah watched him cross into the end zone for a walk-off pick 6 before saluting the sea of garnet and gold in the student section. Game over. Micah's stat line told the story of a nightmare. 13 carries for just 50 yards, no touchdowns for the first time all year, and his first career fumble coming at the absolute worst moment imaginable. It was a long walk back to the locker room beneath the roar of those FSU cheers. A few days later, the College Football Playoff Committee threw Florida a lifeline, only dropping them 5 spots to number 8. It was survival for now, but their next game would decide everything. A rematch against Georgia in the SEC title game, except this time, it wasn't about rivalries and revenge. The stakes were much deeper. The road to a national championship began under a haze of smoke in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The Bulldogs were headed to the college football playoff regardless, but for Florida, this was a must-win situation after blowing their final home game against 4-7 Florida State. The momentum quickly shifted because Georgia wasted no time carving the Gator defense apart on their first possession. Then Florida's offense struggled, losing yards and bickering at one another until they were forced to punt. The Bulldogs already smelled blood as they marched once again. However, they stalled near midfield and Florida took over deep in their own territory. Disaster loomed on first down as two unblocked linebackers were going to blow Micah up, but in a blink, he cut underneath them, exploded through daylight, and left a trail of dogs chasing his tail. In seconds, he was gone, an 86-yard explosion that left the stadium shaking. The Heisman favorite had arrived. And yet, Georgia didn't flinch. They punched back, scoring again in under 2 minutes. But so did Micah, this time taking a 77-yard toss to the house. Both teams were lighting up the scoreboard as the first quarter ended tied at 14. It was obvious, this was going to be a high-scoring shootout. Despite the early touchdowns by Micah, Georgia's offense hit its stride while Florida froze. The Bulldogs built a 2-score cushion and Florida trudged into halftime searching for answers, knowing the season hung on by a thread. When the third quarter opened, Coach Terry returned to his star. A screen to Micah picked up a solid 5, then DJ found Burnell on a hitch for a first down. However, lightning struck the following play when Micah caught an option pitch and slashed through Georgia's defense for his third touchdown. He was a one-man wrecking crew, but the Dogs kept up as both offenses traded blows throughout the third quarter, ending tied at 35. Still tied at 35 with 2 minutes remaining, Florida finally had a chance to take their first lead with the ball on the Dogs' 37. However, they were in no man's land. Not close enough to kick a game winner, but also too far to get conservative. On a 2nd and 9, everyone was covered, but DJ escaped a sack and found a lane at the middle before sliding down at the 13-yard line. This game was in the bag. With a running clock, Micah missed a wide open hole and was tackled for only a gain of 1, but it at least forced a timeout. The following play, he corrected his mistake when he burst through a gaping hole up the middle and juked the safety out his shoes for his 4th touchdown. It was 42-35 Gators in the SEC Championship with only 1 minute and 23 seconds left. It should have been the dagger, but the Dogs had ice in their veins. They stormed downfield in under a minute and tied the game, forcing overtime. Both fan bases were anxious, yet chaotic as Georgia won the coin toss and elected defense first. On first down, DJ connected with Tank Hawkins over the middle for a 9-yard gain, then Micah powered through 2 defenders just to gain an inch. He scored his 5th touchdown of the game after his fullback picked up a massive 2-for-1 block, leaving Micah untouched as he glided into the end zone. However, Georgia kept answering and couldn't be stopped. They scored touchdowns in the first and second overtime, then converted on the 2-point try. Down 57-49, pressure was building for the Gators as DJ overthrew an open pass to Micah, but he found another receiver underneath the following play. Facing a critical third down, DJ threw a pass into traffic and somehow Aiden came up with a catch for a huge first down. The next 2 plays belonged to Micah as he caught a 7-yard pass out of the backfield, then scored his 6th rushing touchdown of the game after his left tackle cleared the way with a devastating block. He broke the SEC Championship rushing touchdown record previously held by former Alabama running back Najee Harris. However, there was no time to celebrate because the Gators were still down 2. Coach Terry called another toss since Georgia failed to stop outside runs all game. But this time, chaos ensued. The pulling left tackle was knocked backwards into Micah, slowing his momentum, and he was grabbed from behind by the All-American linebacker. He attempted to break free, but was stopped just short. It was the highest scoring SEC championship game ever played, an instant classic etched in blood, sweat, and heartbreak. Micah's stat line was legendary: 255 rushing yards, 77 more through the air, and 6 total touchdowns. Any other night, he would have been the hero. Instead, he was forced to watch Georgia dance with the SEC trophy on the 50-yard line. It felt like a season's worth of dominance was erased by a single gut-wrenching 2-point play. Days later, Micah's historic year brought him consolation in the form of accolades. He was a unanimous first-team All-SEC selection, first-team All-American, and a record breaker in nearly every rushing category imaginable. The awards also piled up: Walter Camp, Maxwell, Doak Walker, and then the biggest prize of all, the Heisman Trophy. The dream his late father always believed he had achieved was finally in his hands. In that moment, Micah swore he felt his dad's presence, smiling from above. Despite the 57-55 heartbreak, Florida's season wasn't over. The College Football Playoff Committee only dropped them to number 10, barely clinging to a playoff spot. Their reward? A first-round trip to Pasadena for a Rose Bowl showdown with number 7 UCLA. The Rose Bowl in Pasadena was supposed to be a hostile road game, but the Florida faithful traveled in surprising numbers, giving the Gators more support than expected as they ran out of the tunnel for the first-round matchup. From their own 25, Micah motioned back towards DJ before the snap, then exploded into the flats as the ball hit him in stride. He worked his way upfield and left the safety playing in grass as he accelerated towards the end zone. He crossed the goal line and walked towards the crowd before striking the Heisman pose as if Hollywood needed reminding of who the star was tonight. But the game wasn't without setbacks. On another explosive run, Micah crushed a linebacker with a stiff arm, attempted to leap a defender, and came down awkwardly. He left the game briefly, leaving Gator fans holding their breath. However, UCLA used the opening to claw back, scoring to make it 10-7. Micah's return late in the second quarter sparked Florida again. DJ spread the ball to his tight end for a pair of quick gains, then found Aiden deep in enemy territory. After another first down pickup by DJ through the air, he nearly threw a disastrous interception into coverage. However, Micah immediately made UCLA pay. Seconds later, a screen turned into a highlight as Micah put two defenders in a spin cycle at the same time before being greeted in the end zone by ecstatic Gator fans. But UCLA refused to fold. A Florida fumble on the second half kickoff handed the Bruins a short field, and they cashed in to cut the lead. Back on offense, Micah got the ball in the inside zone, but bounced outside towards green grass. He was on his way to the end zone, but a missed block ruined everything. It was a missed opportunity because the Gators stalled and punted the ball back to UCLA, who reignited the stadium after tying the game at 17. Despite this, Micah refused to let Florida break. He pounded inside runs, bounced outside with patience, and hauled in hot throws under blitz pressure. First down after first down piled up until Micah caught a laser from DJ in the flats for his third touchdown of the night. But UCLA fought back once more, tying the game and forcing the Gators into one last drive with under 3 minutes left to play. After Micah was stuffed for no gain on first down, DJ bailed them out with 4 consecutive first downs, 3 through the air and 1 on the ground. Timeout, Bruins. Coach Terry wanted to avoid another Georgia disaster, so he kept the ball on the ground again. But Micah was just too good. He got the ball on the sweep, planted his foot in the ground, and bobbed and weaved his way into the end zone for a potential game-winning score. With only 1 timeout and 49 seconds left, the Bruins failed to score and the Gators survived 31-24. Micah finished with 4 scores and over 250 yards, cementing himself as player of the game. They left Pasadena victorious, but the road only gets harder. Next stop, a date with number 2 Louisville in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. The college football playoff shifted back to Atlanta, where Florida stepped into Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the 3rd time this season. Only this time, a Peach Bowl trophy was waiting at the end. Florida rolled number 2 Louisville 27-7, claiming the Peach Bowl trophy and punching their ticket to the semifinals, a Sugar Bowl showdown with in-state rival Miami. The Sugar Bowl didn't feel like a semifinal. It felt like a war between 2 bloodlines, Florida and Miami, in-state rivals with decades of animosity, colliding in New Orleans with more than just bragging rights on the line. Miami fought back late, but the clock was their enemy and Florida closed out a 31-15 win, booking a ticket to Las Vegas for the national championship. And waiting for them in Vegas? Another rematch against rival Georgia for all the glory. It all came down to this: number 10 Florida versus number 4 Georgia. The Gators embarrassed the Dogs in Week 8, cruising to a 35-13 blowout behind a Micah masterpiece. But the Dogs got revenge in the record-breaking SEC championship thriller, a 57-55 instant classic. Now, the national title is on the line. Winner takes home the hardware that matters most. The high-powered Georgia offense received the opening kickoff, but went 3 and out. Then Florida wasted no time feeding their superstar. Starting at the 37, Micah went to work. First, 5 yards on the inside zone, then 3 more on a toss. But things opened up on 3rd and short when Micah slipped through a crease and broke free for 20 yards. However, despite Micah cooking early, the Dogs eventually found their footing and forced a field goal. Georgia answered with a touchdown on a long drive. Then it became a defensive slugfest for much of the first half as both sides forced multiple punts. Taking over from their own 28-yard line late in the second quarter, Micah gashed the Dogs up the middle for an easy first down. Then on the next play, he broke free again, but this time he went untouched right through the heart of Georgia's defense for an electrifying 55-yard touchdown run. The Gator crowd roared and the sideline erupted as the lead was snatched away just like that. Georgia killed the little momentum they had left when they coughed up the ball on the next possession and Florida recovered in prime field position. DJ hit a strike down the sideline, then connected with Aiden for another first down, and the Gators were rolling once again. But things quickly changed. DJ was sacked, then 2 plays later, he threw a costly interception in the red zone. This was huge because the Gators not only had a chance to go up 2 scores, but they were also getting the ball first after halftime. Nevertheless, Florida regrouped out of halftime, methodically moving downfield behind big plays from Micah and Aiden. But just outside the red zone, the Gators began to stall. It was 3rd and long, so Coach Terry called a screen for Micah expecting a blitz. He caught the pass with the convoy in front of him and nearly scored before being taken down at the 6-yard line. The Gators were ready to punch it in, but disaster struck. DJ fumbled the snap in the jumbo package, Georgia pounced on it, then punished the Gators with a long touchdown drive to reclaim the lead, 14-10 heading into the final quarter. The fourth quarter began with fireworks. DJ hit Aiden across the middle for a huge gain, nearly breaking free for 6, then connected with him on a deep out for another first down. Moments later, Micah caught a wheel route and was tackled just short of the first down marker, but the Dogs are holding strong and forced a 4th down. However, the offense remained on the field. Facing a 4th and 2, Coach Terry called the very same play Florida had been stuffed on in the SEC Championship, a toss to Micah. But this time, Micah refused to be denied. He bounced wide, hit the Jets, and a crushing downfield block sprung him free. Georgia fans were stunned. The Dogs couldn't put points on the board, but they still had 3 timeouts, so they punted and relied on their defense. Florida needed to finish. 1 first down was all they needed to win the Natty, and everybody once again knew who was getting the ball. Micah picked up 2 yards on the first down sweep, forcing the first Georgia timeout. On 2nd and 8, he burst through an open hole, and at that moment, everyone repping the blue and orange knew. Georgia called timeout, but the game was essentially over. However, Micah sealed the game in his legendary career with one last touchdown run the very next play. The Gators finally reached the mountaintop, winning the national championship 24-14 in a hard-fought battle. Under the brightest lights of his career, Micah delivered once again, 202 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and the final dagger that sealed Florida's first title since the Tim Tebow era. As the confetti rained down, Micah stood in the middle of the field with tears streaming down his face. This is the dream he and his father mapped out back in high school. The Heisman, the championship, just the chance to etch his name into history. But he had done it all. His historic numbers spoke for themselves. 736 carries for 5,836 yards and 68 touchdowns. 172 catches for 2,174 yards and another 20 touchdowns. All with only 1 fumble across his entire career. But the real story wasn't just in the stats, it was in the journey. It was in Coach Terry, who believed in him when others didn't. It was in his mother, who sacrificed everything to give him a chance. And it was in his father, where this entire dream began, teaching him the game, sharpening his focus, and instilling a fire that never burned out. Now, with the national championship trophy high above his head and the stadium screaming his name, Micah realized this wasn't just his victory, it was their victory, and his dad's spirit would live on through it forever. Micah Cook walked off the field that night as a Heisman winner, a national champion, and a future top 5 NFL draft pick. His story was more than just football. It became a reminder that dreams don't die when life knocks you down. They only die when you stop chasing them.